Hello, I'm Dr.Christian Barrientos Ichaso. I'm international business lawyer. Today is Sunday. We have a special podcast with Martin Arostegui. Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel, for sharing of channel international law, international trade, international business, international companies, arbitration, and others. Today is Sunday. We have a special edition. Today is February 20, 2022, the year. It's a special and complaint podcast against corruption, against terrorism, and against drug trafficking. But this podcast is a special edition from the experience and knowledge of Martin Arostegui. He's a special international investigative journalist in various parts of the world, around the world. He worked with Voice of America, worked with Wall Street Journal, worked with the Daily Telegraph, the Washington Times, Fox News, CNN, UP, United Press International, and France 24. He's an analyst and anti-terrorism consult for the international security. Subscribe, share this YouTube channel, and thank you so much. Hello, friend of the International Law channel in YouTube. Thank you for subscribing. We have a special edition and podcast today, Sunday. We have a special edition because today is 2022, and the nuclear crisis is in progress in Europe. Europe have a level 2 and DEFCON is a warning system. And now we talk with the most important journalists in the world who work with the most important media. He's Martin Arostegui. He worked with the CNN, Fox News, France 24. He worked with Fox News, Washington Times, International Press, and other media. Thank you so much, Martin Arostegui. This is special Sunday and podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. You might, when you introduce me, again, thanks for the promotion, but you introduced me as saying I have worked with Fox News and CNN and Wall Street Journal. I'm not actively with them right now, so let's just get that. Let's get that straight. But yes, I have worked for all of them in covering various important national stories in the past on an ongoing basis. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Christian. And I think we are indeed at a very important time, at a very conflictive and dangerous moment. As you say, the DEFCON levels have risen. DEFCON 5 is normal. The US has raised it to DEFCON 4. That's indicative of the fact that they see a conflict with Russia already in progress. It's happening. They're already in a conflictive or potential war situation with Russia. I don't think it's going to get to the point of a direct confrontation. Whatever happens, at least the way it looks now, will be limited to Ukraine and may in fact be limited to only a part of the Ukraine. The action so far has been in the fighting so far, intensification of fighting has so far been in eastern Ukraine, which as I predicted in my previous talks with you, would be the focus, would be the perhaps the main would be the main focus of any Russian operations, at least in initial stages. As I said, I think the Putin may have decided to accept the petition of his Duma to recognize 2 Russian breakaway provinces of eastern Ukraine as independent republics and therefore worthy or under Russian protection, and therefore perhaps escalate Russian assistance to the pro-Russian militias which have been operating in this area for years. All indications are they have intensified artillery, mainly at this point, it's mainly limited to artillery attacks on frontline Ukrainian positions around these two provinces, and blaming it, of course, on, with major propaganda blitz, blaming the effort to blame the escalation on the Ukrainians, saying they feel threatened by Ukrainian forces, which from all appearances, I mean, from all objective information, it appears to be a manufactured invention. I mean, there is no indication that Ukrainians have in any way attacked or taken the initiative to attack Russian positions. It would make absolutely no sense for the Ukrainians to do that. And in fact, interviews from journalists on the front line say that, quote, Ukrainian officers are saying that they have received orders, in fact, not to even fire back, okay? President Zelensky of Ukraine, who's feeling the heat, I think, for the first time, until now he's trying to play down the Russian threat, but he can no longer obviously do that, has said that he's even willing to go and meet with Putin anywhere Putin decides he wants to meet him, and at an hour and place of his convenience. So all indications are the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian military, are trying to de-escalate or create a situation in which they can arrive, or they're not doing everything possible not to provoke the Russians, and saying that they're indicating they're probably prepared to make concessions. So any combat initiative is, at this point, would have to be strictly Russian. Now, as to whether the conflict develop outside of the eastern Ukraine region, we don't know. At this point, frankly, I would not be totally sure about that. There is talk that they were going to attack Kiev directly, missile strikes targeting the main military or governmental targets in the Ukraine, the defense ministry, maybe the presidential palace itself, main military bases, main communications, main military depots, arms depots, that kind of thing. It's very possible. If they go for an all-out attack, that's probably what would happen, as well as key military installations throughout the country. But we have a ways. I think we may have a ways before we get that far. And French President Macron was on the phone with Putin today. The fact that he hasn't said anything after the conversation would indicate that he doesn't really have anything new to report, and therefore that there's no good news. So we'll see. At this stage, if it progresses to an all-out war, which is certainly possible, we're not there yet.
You think is the plan B of Russia? Is the plan B of Russia amazing with the crisis nuclear, or is a premeditation to do in the future doing this?
No, I don't think it's in the interest of Russia to have a nuclear conflict. I mean, we all know it's a war in which there would be no winners. So I don't think that's likely. I mean, if obviously there's a lot of tension, we have to be prepared. The U.S. has to put all of its forces on alert in the event that could be, that in the unlikely event, the remote event that could be a plan. But as for whether I think that it is likely to escalate to that, I doubt it, unless Russia would have to invade, I think, a NATO country, Poland, possibly Romania, maybe, or the Baltic states in the north, which is a latent possibility, but not likely, and there are no movement of troops around those areas, so that's very unlikely at the moment. Or strike at NATO bases there, which is also highly unlikely. No, I think Putin is doing that. I think Putin's getting a lot out of this, frankly. I think he's gotten a lot out of this without even invading Ukraine. And if he decides that he can continue to get a lot out of this conflict or this showdown with the US and NATO without invading Ukraine, he may well opt for that. He's gotten tremendous amount of international attention. He's become the arbiter of international peace. He's got all the European leaders going to Moscow to negotiate with him separately from Biden. He's managed to divide NATO up to a point. We know the US wants Germany, for example, to stop the Nord Stream pipeline project, which would bring Russian gas directly to Germany. And Germany has pretty much said no. I mean, well, they haven't said no directly, but they certainly haven't said that they're going to go along with that. And I don't see how the US can force Germany to do that, frankly, without risking an open rift in NATO, which they certainly don't want to do. And frankly, the sanctions that have been threatened against Russia, or some of which may actually go into effect very soon now, don't seem to hurt Russia that much. I mean, it's more export controls. Yes, these have long-term consequences. It's already, for example, prevented Russia from developing some of its industrial projects, its arms industry, for example. But no, I mean, for example, Russia just inaugurated its AWAC type radar plane, the A100, I believe it's called, which had supposedly been delayed or had been obstructed due to a lack of technology it could acquire from the West due to existing sanctions. And they managed to do it anyway. They're right now working, I think, on a new fighter generation, the Sukhoi 35, which again, I think has been delayed again due to possibly the effect of the sanctions on their ability to acquire technology and parts. But again, it seems to be going ahead. So, yes, it's inconvenient for Russia. They're going to have maybe more inconveniences. I think the British just passed new regulation or legislation not allowing any more, stopping the visa for money program by which Russians could go in and acquire and could get a visa to live in the UK in exchange for financial investments. But frankly, I don't think Russia is too troubled by that. In fact, in the past few days, much to everybody's surprise, President Biden and some leading State Department officials have said that they're not going to apply the SWIFT prohibition. They're not going to prohibit Russia from trading on SWIFT. In other words, that financial transactions can continue with Russia without dollar transactions. That they're not going to be excluded from the international banking system. So even the U.S. is quite openly telling Russia that they don't really have that much to worry about. Sanctions-wise, yes, they're going to be bothered. They're going to be further limited, perhaps. They're going to be, but as anything crippling at the moment, I just don't see it. And so I don't think Russia is to dissuade it from that.
The diplomatic relation is very important now with NATO doing, United States with the G7 country, the most important country in the world, who designed in Munich, in Germany, the new action for sanctions for Russia in the case we invade Ukraine. Very interesting. The Russian bear have a similar similar case. Is the Russians say the bear dancing when he stopped the dancing. Now Russia is the bear who dancing and he have to stop the dancing. It's a proverb of Russia. It's interesting because he is imagine, no? It's very interesting.
Yeah, I saw when it stopped dancing. Supposedly, the military maneuvers were supposed to end on the 20th of February when Russia was supposed to bring all its troops back home. They're starting to, but that apparently that's been extended. So supposedly for the end of these militaries around Ukraine is no longer seems no longer to be applicable. It's been no longer is. There's this nuance here, and it was announced that Russians would remain in their positions in Belarus, which are the threatening positions. They're the ones that are closest to Kiev, the Ukrainian capital. That was announced by President Lukashenko of Belarus, not by Moscow, not by the Kremlin, not by Putin. There's a certain nuance there. Putin can always say, "Well, Lukashenko said that," but that's not what I said. So I think he's still he's still probing to see what more diplomatic concessions he can get out of this, or what more concessions he can get diplomatically. So I wouldn't totally close the door yet on a diplomatic solution. But his central demand is that, Ukraine has to announce its decision to join NATO. NATO has to pretty much give ironclad reassurances that they will not accept Ukraine as a member. And obviously that is very difficult for NATO to do. Whether perhaps a statement by Zelensky, by the Ukrainian government, to the effect that they are not going to join NATO would satisfy Russia, perhaps. And Zelensky seems to be prepared to do that from his latest statements. He's ready to meet with Putin, which means that if he's ready to meet with Putin, it's because he's ready to give him something. And he's in his interviews, in the interviews he's given in Munich and since, he has downplayed his desire to join NATO. So there's a possibility that could happen. NATO cannot possibly, it'd be very difficult for NATO to say, no, we're not going to admit Ukraine. Imagine if, any new membership of NATO is conditioned on a Russian veto. I mean, it stops being an anti-Russian alliance in that case. So, or an alliance to defend against Russia. It's absolutely ridiculous. NATO can't do that. So that's not going to happen. They can maybe go as far as saying they've already said, we have no immediate plans to admit Ukraine. There are complications of admitting Ukraine and this kind of thing, but they cannot rule it out if Ukraine decides to do it. That's Ukraine. I think it would have to be pretty much left up to Ukraine. Ukraine has to make it clear that they're not going to do this. And that's about as much as can be expected. If that's enough to satisfy Putin, perhaps.
The big party, the Russia big party. Very funny. Thank you so much, Martin. This is the first video. We continue with the other video, but now we close this video. For conclusion, thank you, Martin. What to say in the conclusion?
Well, again, I think I'll just repeat what I said at the beginning. We're at a very dangerous moment. Russia could decide to go for an all-out invasion of Ukraine, although I believe that for the moment, at least, it's going to be limited. Fighting will be limited to the Donetsk region and Lugansk. And I think at this point, whether we have a war or not is pretty much, aside from being, Putin has pretty much decided that he's going to submit Ukraine. But I mean, the other player in this at this point, the only one who can change things at this point is President Zelensky of Ukraine. If he says that he's not going to join NATO, perhaps that his country is not going to join NATO, perhaps it could de-escalate tensions. But unless something like that happens, some concession by Ukraine that Putin is prepared to accept, it's unlikely that tensions will de-escalate at any time soon.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. It's the experience of the investigative journalist Martin Arostegui, the most important person for me. Thank you, guys. Subscribe and share this video.